You're listening to the Adventuring Party for the 5th week of July 2021. This week, the party discussed the design of abilities for RPG characters, and whether it's okay to let players make up their own. The Adventuring Party, discussing tabletop and related gaming the Irish way.
Welcome to the party. I'm Owen.
I'm Liam.
And I'm Scarr, apparently.
And today, we are here to discuss spell design. Specifically, why can't players design their own special abilities? So, in some games, you are given the option to design your own spell. And many of the guidelines are going to boil down to ask your GM, though in the past, there have been games that actually fully systemize this process. Any first thoughts, Liam?
Yeah, I mean, I know I often mention it, but Ars Magica has full custom design rules for building your own spells. Like there's an entire chapter on it, but it's also the magic system in that is more complex than most. Like effectively, you've got 15 combinations of spell type that something can be, because you have the 5 major branches and then like the 10, or is it 9 branch offs. So you got like creation, destruction, change, control, and I can't remember what the other one is off the top of my head. And then you'd have like, water, fire, magic, and a bunch of other stuff as well. So, okay, you want to make a spell that puts out a bonfire. Okay, well, that'd be Perdo Igni. Boom. And then you state the level of effect, and you cast it spontaneously, or you can spend time in your lab formulating it, so it's a lot easier for it to cast. Like, it's the essence, like a lot of the essence of the game is that you can just have fun and make your own magic. But it's very formalized, and there's a lot of examples there, and it's very clear that if you're making a spell, that it will be more powerful than a spell that's already there. So it's quite easy, and there's a lot of examples out there, and even just online communities have created their own spell books, and people can just copy those spells as well.
I mean, the general guideline in nearly every RPG is, if you're producing a spell that's better than a spell in the book, please stop.
I mean, generally, yeah. I mean, you can absolutely. So, like, I think in one of the games, so there's one spell which is a level 35, which is Ball of Abysmal Flame. It's like a really powerful fireball, and that targets an individual. But if you bump that by 5, you can target a group, and if you bump that by 5, you can target an area. So you could say, okay, that entire field or compound, boom, there's a massive fireball into it. That's a level 45 spell, which is a very powerful spell. You want to have a very seasoned or very, very dedicated caster on Creo Igni to be able to cast that spell successfully. But it would be devastating. But Ars Magica also makes no pretense at game balance in terms of, like a mage should just be able to kill a mortal. Unless they have no focus on any kind of combat magic or destruction magic at all, they will just straight up kill a mortal. But the game has a troop system to kind of balance that, and the mages should be able to go toe-to-toe with each other, unless there's high specialization or a massive disparity in how long. If somebody's just like newly gone through their gauntlet and somebody who's like really seasoned and has 100 years of casting magic, there'll be a big disparity there.
Absolutely.
The problem is, I think what you're saying is like making a more powerful spell than a spell that already exists. Stop, because you're going to impact on balance. But Ars Magica already, like, it doesn't make any attempt at balance, really.
I saw a great discussion once about that in Pathfinder, that if you basically put together, let's say you're doing Fireball, and you decide, I'm going to design a custom Fireball that only affects Fey creatures. I'll call it Feyball. And what's fair there? And you'd be like, oh, okay, well, that should probably do more damage than a Fireball. So instead of 66, it'll do 68 against Fey. And that's perfectly sound design. You restricted who it can affect, but you bumped up the damage codes. Problem is, of course, that if you get some sort of character who can hot swap in their spells, pick and choose when they need to use them,
yeah,
we're off to fight the Fae today, and the wizard's like, grand, I'm preparing 3 Fae balls, not 3 fireballs. And the Fae ball is then way stronger as a result. So it's an interesting thing where you can basically you can make what is a balanced spell. Should be more damage, because this other effect the effect is broadly weaker, but specifically stronger. And specifically stronger is often a place where special ability design falls down. Because yes, it is specific. Yes, it is not as broad as the broad use one. But it turns out that with clever players, that little restriction don't actually matter.
That's the question of, do you want to reward that sort of clever play? Is that something you want to reward, or are you looking more for party balance and teamwork and interplay between different groups? Like, there are I know certain people who really, really like the idea, the party went out of the way, they got intel on who they were fighting, what they were weak to, what they were strong against, and then adjusted their spell options to compensate for that. And some GMs would say, well, that's really good, smart play, and it should be rewarded. Others would say, no, that just means that the wizard is super powerful compared to the static fighter. We had to avoid the situation.
Yeah.
I mean, this entire situation, played out in 3.5, but without people making spells. It was Splatbooks and wizards themselves doing it. Because they just published, they had 2 or 3 books coming out every month, and it was just, what spell do you want? Well, pick up that book, it'll be in there. I wouldn't really get so upset about it if it's majorly impacting balance in like one fight or one kind of even a chapter. If you're running a modular book, even kind of one chapter, so it might impact on several sessions. Like parties going from A to B and they get caught in the fairy wilds for a little bit, and it impacts on that. But if it starts to majorly skew the entire campaign, like if the campaign is all about the Feywilds, then I'd be worried about that base spell.
Scarr, you yourself have a broad experience of a bunch of different RPGs. Any spell design systems jump out at you that you've encountered?
When I think about this problem, my brain starts to go back to, there's a superhero RPG that I was big into for a few years in the mid-2000s, Mutants and Masterminds, specifically the second edition. That had a very explicit effects-based power creation system, to the point where if you got the ultimate power book, it would literally just bring every power in the game down into, well, you make this power by adding this plus this base effect and this base effect, and you could really get down to the atoms of power design at that point. And of course, people abused the hell out of it, and it was just like everyone always took the corrosion power because it was drain toughness, then do damage.
Players like experimenting. Players like having fun. So, that kind of book can be good. I guess we just need to be kind of aware. I guess get them to nearly vet what they want to take by you, and then for you to just say, okay, well, look, you can have this, but I'm a little wary of how it's going to play out. So we'll try it for a couple of sessions, and I may nix it if it turns out to be too strong.
Yeah, there was an awful lot of make sure this is GM approved for all design work, which sort of puts a lot of onus on the GM to vet all the players' characters, which some people are not in for. But with a super powers-based, effects-based system, you want that flexibility, but there's 2 different reasons why you want that flexibility. One is what I would call simulation. It's just like, well, it's not very good, but Superman has super breath, so he needs to have air control of some sort. So we'll take give him air control with these things, even though I'm just going to be punching and heat beam fidgeting most of the time. I still need to spend a few points on air control because, he has the atmospheric gas giant super compressed his lungs or something. I forget exactly how it works. Silver Age, man. Silver Age.
Honestly, the super breath is slightly more explicable than the heat vision. The super breath you can kind of come up with. The heat vision, you're like,
how does he shoot lasers out of his eyes?
Just like, when you stare a hole in someone, yeah, he really can do that. Better than a human can.
Hey, look, he can fly,
It's supposed to be the same thing as his X-ray vision, except it's giving out X-rays instead of taking them in or something.
One of the explanations was he's got low-level telekinesis. And so what he's doing is he's agitating molecules with his eyes, and that's the heat vision. And the reason he can lift up really heavy things without them collapsing under their own weight is the telekinetic field he extends around it. And that's why Superboy, when he got his altered mix of power, had tactile telekinesis, so whatever he could touch, he could lift. And so that was the kind of the the broad explanation of where Superman's powers come from. But if you mentioned that fact to certain Superman fans, you were implying he was actually less strong than he appeared, and you'd get shut right down. You know, so...
There are single issue people out there that kind of thing can be very important to.
My point is that you could definitely create a power design system, but if you're going to make it the focus of play, it will devour space in your book very quickly.
Oh, it will.
Like I think the spell section and the spell creation section in Ars Magica with the artifacts and all are probably about half the book in any edition. So really it comes down to like how much of your game do you want to devote to that. And certainly modern games in general now seem to be veering away from all that kind of stuff in general, and do seem to be veering more towards the answer of ask a GM or come up with your own rule on it. You know, that there's, what did they say, rules not rulings or something?
I'm all rules, not rulings, but that's just me.
Me, I don't really like that. I don't know that I feel as strongly as yourself, Owen, about it.
Yeah.
Because me, I'm busy, and I want to have a clear, concise rule book that tells me everything, and I don't want to have to come up with no, I will come up with case rules, and if if a rule doesn't apply, I'll absolutely ignore it, and generally be done by consensus with the player, going, okay, this doesn't really particularly make any sense, so how about we do less damage for that, or more damage for that, or I'll just give you this, roll this skill or this stat to try and get around that. That's fine. That's always going to come up naturally in play. But in general, I want a pretty tight rule book. And I kind of feel that a lot of this stuff around ask your GM or work with your GM for it, I feel like a lot of the time it makes me the bad guy rather than the game being the bad guy. So rather than the game telling people, no, you can't do this, and no, you can't have this, it's ask your GM. And then it's down to your GM to say, no, you can't have that.
Yeah. But that's on the GM having a very strong understanding of the rule set and knowing when to go, hold on a second now. I've got 4 examples of this, by the way, just to talk about relation to different things. The first one is I was running a Necessary Evil game under Savage Worlds.
Yeah.
And one of the players... basically, everyone's producing a supervillain, and he made his supervillain basically a cultist of an evil god who had no powers himself. All his powers were in this magic amulet that could be taken off. So he got a point reduction for it being in an object, he got a point reduction for it being basically losable from himself. Okay? And what it did was, every round he could fire out 3 5-inch blast templates that did 3d6 damage, and anyone who's hit by one of the templates had to make a vigor roll at -4 or go unconscious for a minute.
That's pretty stonking.
And the player said, by the way, if you take this off me, I have no powers, I can do nothing, I'll be really sad. And I said, that's emotional abuse. So we tried 2 or 3 sessions of that, and it was way too strong. And I said, dude, it's too strong. Sorry, it trivializes every fight instantly. We're going to have to get rid of this. Or I have to start making bad guys who are immune to it, which is no way to go. But like you hate that situation where you're immediately like, okay, yeah, you followed all the procedures properly there. You followed the rules to the letter. It's too strong.
Look, why I don't understand why every time I try and bring my horse anywhere, I can't bring my horse. I just want to get 1 spirited charge off. Now, granted, when I crit, I'll do 5 times damage with it, and the guy will take 200 damage and die instantly. But not once in this campaign have I ever got to use my horse to charge somebody. The hell! If somebody takes an unreusable combo, I don't know that it's your job as GM to have to deploy that and to have to kind of make the game steer around that.
You have to have the strength to go, you have outthought the design system, sir. Congratulations. That's got to go away. Sorry, too strong. And we'll do whatever you like. I'll redesign however you like. I'll give you whatever you want to basically redo this, but it's too strong. Sorry. It's like the effect is too strong, and as GM, it's going to warp the rest of the game. So, because there are fights in this game, we want the fights to be interesting, and they're not interesting while everyone wait for your card comes up, and you incapacitate everybody here. So, away that goes. And I think you have to be able to do that. You have to admit that, yep, this person has out-designed the system. So good job then. How'd you go? Another one, the TORG spell design system from the first edition of TORG. Basically, the better you rolled, the more you could customize your custom spell. You could reduce its cost, you could make it easier to cast, you could give it more effects if you roll better. Yeah, that one broke pretty fast.
Is this one where they clearly didn't put enough minimums and maximums in the on what you can do with it?
What they did wrong was they allowed you to spend possibilities on the dice roll. So you could jack it into the stratosphere, your roll, and then have the reality twists to accommodate this new spell, you know? The Whirling Cavalcade of Death or whatever. And the Whirling Cavalcade of Death, in fact, was a Whirling Cavalcade of Death and slaughtered everyone in front of you. So it was an interesting idea. They basically failed to account for something, and when you fail to account for something like that, players will often find the fact that you failed to account for it and able to build something quite bizarre.
Yeah, that's one of the things about scalable effects like that. It's like at a certain point you go from damage man to end fight to solve adventure.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you allow infinite scaling, you will incentivize people to go as high as possible, because some people want the play experience and some people want the end of mission experience.
I think that there's a problem anywhere there where it doesn't. So I know the current Warfare 4th Ed, I think there's a problem with Magic in that once you get levels of success, like for every 3 levels of success, you can tag additional stuff on. You can double the range. You can, I don't recall the other effects. You can add additional targets.
Add duration, add additional targets, yeah.
All those kind of things. For me, there's a big problem with that, and that's something that I've tried to bring in house rule in mine, is that, okay, if you want those extra effects, you have to spend to do it. Because by default, it just happens. You just go, oh, cast it, and I got 9 success levels on it. I only needed 4, so I've got 5 extra ones, so I can tag on an extra guy on here. Which for me is, okay, well then you spend your success levels, and then you hit the 2 people, but you'll do less damage. I know it's totally different, it's a different system, but we played the Alien RPG last night, and they have a nice thing whereby, you know, you might be shooting at somebody and you get 1 success. Let's say you get 3 successes total. So you only needed 1. Well, you can just leave those 2 extra successes as damage, or you could, you know, push them back 5 feet. Or, you know, you could knock them prone, knock their weapon out of their hand, something like that. There's little extra tags, but you spend your successes for it. I think that's a very important thing that systems need to try and control exactly how powerful these things can be, because otherwise the success is just phenomenal. It's just devastating. Like,
I've got a proposed Magic house rule for that, basically based around the fact that the scaling needs to be toned way down on the spells. And it's actually, I think it works okay, but it needs a bit of fiddling with to get to fully work. It is a similar sort of problem when you unbound the scaling on anything like that, and particularly it's vulnerable for a player design thing, where some player rolls stupid well, and players often want, hey, if I roll stupid well, this should do great stuff. And that's a very human impulse to go, this should do stuff on a crit. Because spells sometimes don't. It's like, I'll put this stuff in where it does stuff on a crit. And as a GM, you're kind of like, ooh, that should be good. How good should it be? And you try to design that out, and then you'll often hit problems because the players will be like, "Whoa, I got a crit against the big bad." And you're like, "Oh, that's him dead."
This is often a lot of the games now are kind of divorcing bad guy mechanics from player mechanics. But one thing I always say with most games, because most games the same mechanics are applied for the bad guys as the players, is like, okay, that's great. Do you want the bad guys to be able to do that to you? Because that's usually like, oh yeah, okay, oh, well, yeah, actually that would have taken out most of the party in 1 hit. Maybe not. Let's leave that off the table for now. We'll think about it.
2 systems, modern systems that do the spell design or special ability design fairly well are the Soulbound, also from Cubicle 7 for their Age of Sigmar RPG. Actually is a really comprehensive spell design system. And it basically gives the mechanics by which reverse engineers effectively tells you, here's how we built all the spells in the book. For damage codes and range, everything else, this is how much it costs. And you can reverse engineer any spell by looking at it. So you can actually go, ooh, we can actually build this one. Now, I know I could produce a couple of hyper specialized spells that would be very good for their particular role, but they'd be very good for their particular role. But it's an interesting one. You can actually go and you can design your spells now. Because on one level, spell customization is a great way for someone to express their character, apply their creativity, and express their character in a mechanical way. I know even with trappings and something like Savage Worlds, one of the players was super happy that his bolt could be a swarm of bees. He was like, this is great. My basic attack is a swarm of bees.
Had they been watching Dr. Bees?
Yeah, it meant a lot to them because they could feel like, you're covered in bees, you know?
Bees!
And it meant a lot to them that they had that creativity. One of the most popular powers in 3.5 edition D&D for psionics was their astral construct power, which was a completely scaling summon animal where you just designed it and you could make it look like whatever you liked, do whatever you liked.
So like the Pathfinder Eidolon.
Yeah, and it was basically like you designed this thing where you could summon, what do you summon? I summon a swarm of saw blades with eyes which track you down and slash you. I could do whatever, like I could summon, I could apply my creativity and I feel a great ownership over this power. This is my power. This is like, this is like Bigby's grasping hand, but it's my guy's thing. You know, maybe other wizards later on will use this spell or other signs of it. And that's actually really cool for a player. And if you were running an extended campaign in the same universe, wouldn't it be cool to be like, oh, that's that guy's custom spell, and then you're another wizard later on in the same universe, 2 years later, could be like, hey, can I learn your man's his Rapididor spell? Like, yeah, you can learn Preston's Rapididor, you know? And that's a real cool little bit of personal world building you can do. And it makes it's really fun. People feel like, oh, I've designed my own spell. I've got my own spell here. This is really awesome.
Well, that was one of the cool things with Ars Magica was learning that, because again, like you could teach other members of the Covenant spells you knew, or you could make a copy of it and it could be sold to other Covenants and stuff as well. So like that, you can disseminate knowledge, and it could be really cool. Oh, I've got this cool spell that everybody wants.
And I think that's really to be appreciated. That you can do that, and like that's actually good. People enjoy that. People feel creative, feel inspired by that. But there's got to be a solid framework there. Now that one works purely off going, here are the numbers of how spell creation work, and design what you can. So that is vulnerable to someone finding an ideal breakpoint on numbers and designing something around that. That's the bad side of that one. You can also do effects-based design. The John Carter of Mars RPG from 2D20 had basically every character produce custom talents right at the start. And they gave very good effects-based design guidelines for what they should do. And said anyone can design their custom talent right from the start. This is what makes your character kind of unique. Design this and have a look at it. Now, it's vulnerable in that you're kind of asking players to do that before they've really played the game very much.
Yeah, I think it's hard enough if you're playing something like Spirit of the Century or something like that, come up with, sick tags for you to be able to tag during a game. It's hard enough to get that out of them without bringing in heavy mechanics.
But it was it wasn't, it's not a ridiculously heavy system, but it was I thought it was really cool. It's like, this is really cool that you can be like, okay, my guy is really skilled with 2 weapons, and he's got jumping attack, so I designed this whole jumping attack 2-weapon stab thing that my character does. And I thought that's really cool. That the right from the start you're able to go, yes, I can build it. And they had a bunch of custom kind of explanations of, this is what John Carter's special thing is. Basically, he jumps in, because he's super strong, he jumps in and basically kicks someone or jumps in and hits somebody, and there's a big effect off that. And I'm like, that's cool. That's a way to make your character really feel like, yeah, this is what my character does. And you could do it right from the start. And I was like, that's really quite brave. But it's good because it lets you personalize your character. We've talked a lot about spell design. How about more mundane characters? Is there the market for the special technique?
Yeah, that's the sort of thing. It's just like, because you see places with spell design and big spell lists, but it's a lot rare to see like technique design.
And in real life, people come up with techniques.
Life hacks.
Or even just, like, if you look at the history of MMA or martial arts, people came up with holds. This guy came up with this hold. He innovated this hold, you know? You could go back in time. Abraham Lincoln invented the chokeslam, you know? And he did. He was a wrestler. And if you go back through the history of things, you could be like, oh, this move was first created by blah, you know? And someone who's a good fighting arts historian will be able to say, oh yeah, this one was created by this guy, you know?
Well, I know certainly in HEMA they have manuscripts that they've recovered, and a lot of the fighting techniques are based purely on what they figured out, what they think they figured out from the manuscript, because a lot of the arts actually died out. They weren't continuously taught, like it's unlike a lot of the Eastern traditions where there's a clear lineage of people. A lot of these have been reconstructed from what they think the manuscripts are doing.
And there's a bunch of stuff which is silly in modern martial arts that you do, but it's silly because it's actually a training tool to make you ready to use a weapon. There's this whole, oh, I do this! And everyone's like, this is no use in the fight. It's like, yes, it's no use in the fight. However, give me 2 swords, and this stuff is actually really effective, you know? And there's a bunch of tricks like that where it's kind of like, it's sort of fallen out of the wayside of, okay, this isn't relevant anymore, but it's because we're seeing it divorced of the context that made it useful. But ability design, like if someone said, I want a custom thing where I've got my giant axe and I've got this big chain on it, and I want to throw my axe at someone, and then I want to pull the axe back and hit somebody else. Can I come up with that?
So they want 2 attacks around for 1 attack.
But not necessarily. Depending on the system, you could be like, okay, no, depending on the system, I could come up with a way to do this. But it would be something that you'd actually, as a GM, you need a fair bit of game design edge to do it.
Yeah, I mean, for some systems, you'd say, okay, right, well, this can be, okay, well, let's make this Pathfinder 2. Let's make this a feat. It costs you 2 actions, and the second is at -4 or something, and they have to be within a certain distance of each other. Or, like, there's a lot of the 2 hits, two hit strikes. You could say, okay, roll. There's no, you make 1 attack roll for the 2 of them, so it's either good or bad both ways. No to hit penalty, but there's like -3 damage or -4 damage on the second hit. You know, you could easily, but there's a lot of, like that, you've got a lot of stuff to compare it against. And there's a lot of similar power levels that you can easily look at. And that's really your ultimate guide. Like, if the system doesn't have clear definitive rules for how to build these powers and how to do these things, you really have to look at what else is there and what's it comparable to.
Yeah, like, it would be very difficult to do something comparable in 5th Ed, because A, there's not as many examples of these kinds of abilities, and B, there's no clear system for getting them, because the feat system is so siloed off. Like, it's technically an optional rule, and there's no real guidelines for giving players an extra feat or an extra power above what they get from leveling.
I guess that would probably be subbing in for a class ability.
Yeah, which again is something which is doable, and nothing against the rules saying that you can't sub something in for something else, but there's no guidelines for it, so the design onus goes completely onto the GM, and a lot of GMs will punt on that because, like, what's wrong with what we have? Why can't we not be happy? And
it has to sub in for something, because you can't get something for nothing, like.
Yeah, but, like, you talked about earlier about, like, designing custom spells. In older editions of D&D, you simply spent downtime to get those. Like, you just say, all right, I'm going to... Zigby the wizard is going to go off to his tower for 3 months to create Zigby's green fireball. And in those 3 months of play, I'm going to play Jigby the fighter and Nigby the cleric instead. And then after 3 months of in-game time, I'll bring out Zigby, he'll have this cool spell.
3 months of intense hand exercises.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, my character spent 6 months when I was pretty sure we were going to get marched on and there was going to be an army camped outside the walls of our covenant. I spent 6 months learning Field of Abysmal Flame. Because it was going to be, oh, right, that's a nice army you have.
Did that army get burned to the stalks, Liam?
No, the campaign ended around that point anyway, but I never got to deploy Field of Abysmal Flame.
Oh, that's rough, man. That's rough.
I probably should have come up with a more imaginative name as well.
But my point is that different systems have got different tools for handing out these kinds of efforts. Some have downtime mechanics or feat mechanics, or don't use levels, use character points, so it's easier to figure out the cost of something in terms of character points. So some systems have a natural design, and some systems like D&D have better design rules for new magic spells than they do for new martial techniques. So if you want someone to have that power of self-expression, system is going to matter a lot in that regard. And if you're stuck with a certain system that doesn't do that well, and someone wants to design something, you're probably going to have to come to compromises.
Absolutely.
Now, I personally would be fine with, like, you want your feat of throw the great chain axe ability. I'm fine with saying, well, put in the downtime and training time or whatever, and we can figure something out, because bonus actions are already a premium for most classes in 5e anyway, as an example. But not all GMs are going to be that happy just monkeying with something when isn't your alignment and your role-playing enough character expression? So that's a philosophy thing. It's just like how much expression is, pure role-play, and how much is your mechanics, and I think that's probably a different episode.
Well, I think you mentioned the dirty word, the C word that many people don't like. Compromise. Like, really, like, if everything's been reasonable, it's okay. Like, at the end of the day, like, players want to express themselves, and you want to allow your players to express themselves. But at the end of the day, the entire game can't be about them living out their power fantasy, because then it's done at the detriment of the game. It's done at the detriment of you. It's done at the detriment of the other player. So it's not nice having to be the bad guy, but they need to maybe tone down a little of what they want in order to make sure that the game runs smoothly, and you need to control that a little bit to make sure they have a little bit of fun, they get to live it a little bit, they get a bit of their power, but it's not like, I just run the roost and it's great. Like, as much as it's sad seeing the light of creativity go out in someone's eye when they're like, I try to create water inside their mouth or inside their lungs, you can't use a cantrip as a 4th level spell.
Is this, like, a lot of the time, the reason why officially published stuff is granted a greater weight is that it's seen as, this would be better tested and better thought out and better designed, and maybe. But it's often commonly agreed on that, okay, this is at least independent of us been done, and it's been officially released, and everyone can read it, and other people can ask questions about it. Is there room here for a third party to come in and you go, okay, I want a feat where I toss, I want to get a feat where I throw my axe at someone on a chain and I hit somebody and I pull it back and I hit somebody else? Is there a space to go, actually, let's go to the Design Monkey, and there's a Design Monkey person running a Patreon or something, and that person goes, okay, cool, that's the ability you want. That's what you want it to do, what you want it to feel like. Right, I'll design something and I'll send it back to you. And an external person comes up with it, and the GM then basically looks at it and goes, okay, I can approve that, that's fine, that works for me. And someone else has done the work, and they haven't designed something broken. They designed something, someone with a bit of design skill, rather than relying on the GM to suddenly develop design skills. Someone who's actually got a head for design and maybe got a bit of developing experience as well, because this is a cool effect and it's not too busted. Here, how you go. Away you go. That's your custom ability. There's probably something in that, right?
I don't know. I don't think so. One, gamers are notoriously cheap. We begrudgingly pay 10 quid for a PDF splat book. 10 quid for a PDF splat book is too much. I'll just go to the Trove, And who commissioned this opinion? Like, who are they working for? If I want to get if I want a legal opinion, I'll go get a legal opinion, and that legal opinion will probably correspond roughly to my interests, Whereas if you go get a legal opinion, you'll get a contradicting legal opinion in line with your interest, and then we'll go to court and fight it out. There's certainly it's an interesting idea, but I don't see it.
But even if you got someone who's a different GM, someone with a design head in your area, and someone said, this player wants this, could you do it up for me? Like, does that work? Instead of being, hey, I'll try and do this myself, I'm going to legislate for myself. You give it out, pass out to a third party who can have an independent look at it and go, here you go.
Well, the Hive Mind is a great resource. Like, I know, like, there's tons of different Discords, including the Adventure Party Discord, where people can go on and just ask advice, like, hey, I'm having this problem with my player, they want to do this, any ideas how I could implement this mechanic? And people will come up with ideas. They might be terrible ideas, but they could be gold, and certainly asking the Hive Mind is a great thing if you're stuck.
Any final thoughts, Shane?
One last thing is, the main, I think, reluctance to have this kind of big built-out game design system is that often only one or two players in a given party will really want to engage with it. An awful lot of people will just be happy, oh, this is the default options. I'll pick this one. This is close enough to what I'm imagining. I'll just take that. Maybe we'll tweak it a little. But for most things, like, most people don't want to do that monkeying. So you can, if you end up using like a third of your rulebook on this design system, and one person out of every 6 is interested in it, it could seem like an awful lot of rules overhead. There is also the possibility, like, one of the big things I liked about Mutants and Masterminds is that you could spend your hero points to do power stunts. You could say, well, for one turn I have this feat. The feat I choose is a different way to use this power. So I turn instead of having breath control as a separate power, I just spend a hero point, take alternate uses for super strength, and turn it into breath control for one turn. And that was one thing. So it's possible that if you're making this big, chunky power design system for a game, to maximize the use people are getting out of that page space, you might want something like that, where people can dip into it for a quick one-time effect, as opposed to having to grind out their character points to get the exact thing.
No, it's absolutely a way to do it. That you're actually just selecting from the existing stuff, but you're customizing your character, or at least being able to temporarily customize your character on the go. Liam, any other final thoughts?
It's just as a GM, hold the reins, and by all means, let the reins go a little bit. If somebody's really adamant that they want to try this combo, they want to try this power, they want to come up with this thing, let them. But just be aware that you do the power to say no. I'll warn you in advance. Okay, we'll try this, but if it's too powerful, we're going to have to dial it down. And if it does turn out to be too powerful, dial it down. You don't want it dominating the game.
Alrighty. We're going to wrap it up there with our custom stuff, more or less designed. However, if you would like to ask us for any ideas of how to design a custom magic item or custom effect, you can hit us up on our Discord or email us at party@theadventuringparty. But for now, this party's over.
Thanks for listening to The Adventuring Party. You can find show notes and links to things we've mentioned at www.theadventuringparty.net and on our Facebook page. You can leave comments there, or talk to our Twitter account at AdventuringPTY, or you can record a voice message at www.speakpipe.com/theadventuringparty. We can also be contacted directly by email at party@theadventuringparty.net. If you'd like to be in touch with the party all the time, come join our Discord server, link in the show notes. The Adventuring Party is released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share Alike version 3 license.